Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We have three gifted comedians, and I'd like to announce them. They are Howard Feller, Barry Weintraub, and Rhonda Hansome. In the early 1980s, Howard Feller took a comedy class with Mark Jacobs that was given on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, and soon after he started doing clubs with open mic nights. He began playing in diners and doing the comedy circuit in late-night hot spots. At the Boston Comedy Club, Howard met Barry Katz, and he worked at the Comedy Cellar and at Stand Up New York, which led to a Caroline's Comedy Hour on A&E and an MTV half-hour comedy show. And when the MTV Jon Stewart show was looking for a weird, geeky guy as a sidekick for John, Howard got the job. John sat at a bicycle bar and Howard sat at a tractor chair, and the show began with an offbeat talk show with a small but very devoted fan following. The original Jon Stewart show ran for about a year on MTV and ran for another year in syndication throughout the country. Howard has appeared in several films, such as Penny Marshall's Awakenings, and he appeared on 30 Rock as the Super in Tina Fey's Building and in an episode of Law and Order. Howard also appeared on the Howard Stern TV show in an episode of Show in the Hall and in Neil Vardalo's film I Hate Valentine's Day, and recently filmed an NBC pilot called Off Duty. Excuse me. Barry Weintraub graduated magna cum laude with a broadcast journalism degree from Boston University. Naturally, his next step was to become a stand-up comedian. Barry is a regular at the New York City's best comedy clubs, including the world-famous comic strip, The Improv, and the Comedy Cellar. He is also a BBC documentary host and has hosted talk radio in San Francisco, anchored sports television, and has been a writer and producer of television in Los Angeles, as well as having performed on television in the United Kingdom and Australia. On television, Barry has been seen on the Comedy Central, A&E's Comedy on the Road, and Tough Crowd with Colin Quinn. Barry has also written, produced, and created programs for E! Entertainment Television, MGM TV, and Comedy Central. Rhonda Hansome is an African-American stand-up comedian, writer, and director, and actress. She has appeared on Louie, Saturday Night Live, Caroline's Comedy Hour, Stand-Up Spotlight, Arsenio Hall, Evening at the Improv, Showtime at the Apollo, The Joan Rivers Show, and in New York City at Catch a Rising Star in the Improv. Rhonda is also featured in Deborah J. Robinson's 1984 document, I Be Done Been Was Is, that is about obstacles facing the careers of four Black female stand-up comedians, and she has also appeared in such films as Pretty Woman and Little Sister, and has opened for Anita Baker, Diana Ross, and Aretha Franklin. Let me get these super talented comedians online. There we are. Hey, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Rhonda, my first question is to you, being the only lady on this panel that I know of.
I resent that. Wait.
And my first question to you is comedy funny? And if it is, why is it?
Comedy is hard. Comedy isn't funny. Comedy is hard. But I'll tell you, I love comedy. I absolutely love comedy. And I'm actually unique in the world of comedy in that I laugh at my fellow comedians. Usually we just stand in the back and we'll analyze. We'll go, oh, that's funny. Or we'll get jealous and go, damn it, I wish I wrote that. But I laugh long, I laugh loud, I laugh hard. And I just don't laugh at the punchline. I actually laugh at the premise because it screws with their timing.
That's good, Rhonda. How did you get into comedy? Were you funny as a child? That seems like a B-flat question, but to us non-comedians, it's important.
I was a funny child. I had to be because I went to a Catholic school, so that was going to be a given. I always felt funny as a child, and when I saw Alice Arthur on a cable show many, many years ago doing stand-up, I thought, my gosh, I can do that. I was an actress. And just like today, I wasn't getting any acting roles. And I said, I can do that. I want to do that. It just seems so attractive to me. And also because I had a background in sociology from college, I just sort of felt like, well, this is perfect between my minor as a theater major and my major as a sociologist. I combined that, and now I'm doing political comedy.
Beautiful. And what college did you attend, Rhonda?
Brooklyn College.
Yes.
Brooklyn. Yeah. Brooklyn College.
Hey, here's your freaking diploma.
Hey,
Exactly.
Couple, 2-3
I
years.
said freaking out of deference to you. But.
So my next question is for Howard, who is a sidekick of Jon Stewart. Howard, you let Jon Stewart work with you for years. Why would you let it? Why would you let it?
I let him do it. Yeah.
Why would you let a loser like that, who couldn't keep a show on the air, ride on your coattails, Howard?
Yeah. Whatever happened to him? That was interesting. You know what happened? There was a show back in the '80s when people actually cared about comedy. There was a show called "That's My Cat." It's midnight. Anyway, there was a show called the MTV Half Hour Comedy Hour on MTV. That is Barry and Rhonda remember that.
Mario Joyner was the host.
Barry Katz, who owned the Boston Comedy Club, located in New York City. That's a long.
Oh, have we lost Howard?
No, sorry, my bad.
Hearing it. I think I'm coming back. Okay. So I feel like I'm Alice or something. It's like 4 squares. Yeah. So I was on the MTV Half Hour Comedy Hour, and they were casting this talk show hosted by Jon Stewart, and they were looking for a geeky sidekick, and they saw me on the MTV Half Hour Comedy Hour, and I guess I looked geeky enough, so they actually called me. It was like Rocky or something. I had no career. It wasn't getting any work. And one day the phone just rang, and somebody said, "You want to be on a TV show?" And I said, yeah, let me see what I've got going. Yeah, I guess I could do it. So that's how that happened.
And that phone call, was that from Barry Katz, or who was the phone call from?
No, it was from the producer, Madeline Smithberg, who went on to produce The Daily Show, which was a successful Jon Stewart show that I wasn't on.
And was Barry integral to you becoming a comedian? Did he help you in any way?
He was my manager. Yeah, I guess. I mean, he didn't do anything. He just he was there.
You don't look that weird. I just did a thing with 3 beautiful women singers, and I felt like Buddy Hackett. So thank you for making me feel more comfortable, Howard. But you look great, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I
love it.
That's great, because most people think I'm wearing a mask even when I'm not wearing one.
There you go.
I'm writing, and I don't have. There's no place to perform, but I'm always writing. See that?
Well, you all 3 of you are brilliant. Barry, a New York Times article in 1992 said you were a San Francisco comic publishing the Comedy USA Industry Guide, a who's who involving clubs, performers, agents, and managers. And you said that national attendance at comedy clubs had plummeted around that time. Is that around the time that comedians stopped being funny?
Comedians, what did I just walk into? When did comedians stop being funny? What happened? I thought this was suddenly I'm being held in a hostile interrogation. First of all, you have done incredible research, finding shit on the internet that I didn't know was still there. I had no idea. I mean, you're digging some stuff up there. Comedy USA is now online, actually. I've tried to digitize as much as I could. If anyone's ever looked, it's at comedyusa.com. But yeah, comedy had a boom and a bust. So now I'm looking only at myself. I assume I'm on. I don't know. But at that period of time in the early 90s, the clubs were kind of bottoming out, and the landscape was changing. I had my first full-time radio job in San Francisco at that point, and I felt pretty lucky. to have jumped off of the road and to been on radio. And then as soon as the radio jobs ended, I felt like shit. I should have kept the comedy work, because who knows? I canceled like 14 weeks of work to take that first radio job.
Ah, I see. And where were you born, and how did you get into comedy? You know, it's funny. Musicians always put on their bios where they were born and how they got into something, but comedians don't do that. They get right to the funny stuff. So I'm going to ask, like I say, they're B-flat questions. But where were you born, and why did you get into comedy? And were you funny?
I was born in the Bronx Hospital, which later burned to the ground. There is no evidence that I was involved with that, even though my hobby as a child was arson. I almost took the school down that I went to. I started a little fire. Some friends came walking by, and by the time I turned around, that little fire had grown like 7 feet high. I stomped it out. My shoe fell off. My sock almost burnt off my foot. And then I told my mother I happened to be walking past the school and saw the fire and stomped it out. She did not believe me. She beat it out of me. She said, "You're a liar." And she beat me until I stopped lying. Had she left me alone, I could be the Democratic nominee for president today. I would have been a great liar. But
there you go.
I became a comic. I don't know. I was always like, disturbing class. Was it Billy Crystal who said there's a difference between the class clown and the class comedian? The class clown is the guy who pulls the chair out from the girl about to sit. The class comedian is the guy who talks him into doing it.
I think that was Billy, yeah.
So I was the comedian.
That's a good one.
And Rhonda, this is a true story. This next question. One of my worst fears is that I'm home in my underwear and nothing else, just my briefs, and I'm eating chicken. And I start to choke on a chicken bone. And I start to think, would I go out in a hallway and knock on the door and point to my throat to save my life? Or would I stay home and die because I'm too embarrassed to go outside and knock on the door in my briefs? I think the latter might be what happened, which is kind of sad. When you started performing comedy, was there anything you feared, or were you as bold as you are today, Rhonda?
I've pretty much always been a bold bitch. So I just, came right out with, what I had to say. I wrote stuff. I went and stood online to audition for these fancy, famous clubs like Catch a Rising Star and the Improv. And I just went with full confidence. You see, I had already, been working with studying acting. I studied acting at Brooklyn College, and that actually performing arts had been my minor, and I switched sociology, and so I had a lot of experience with being on stage, and so I didn't have any reason to lack confidence. All I wanted to do was be in the spotlight and hopefully get paid for it.
It's kind of funny because a lot of musicians and comedians, I think, are very shy. They're either shy or introverted, and a lot of musicians, at least, they get more attention by playing in the audience. But you seem to be introverted and fearless in your comedy right from the get-go.
Well, that's the dichotomy there. I'm actually very sensitive. Cancer is my sign, July 10th, and I call it a moon child because I prefer not to have a fatal disease describing, when I have my birthday. But as a water sign, I'm very sensitive, and I am actually shy, and I overcompensate with the comedy.
And did sociology help you in your comedy, by the way?
Absolutely. It really gave me a lot more practice with analytical thinking, with critical thinking, which, had started at my Catholic schools. I went to Catholic school from kindergarten through high school. And also just thinking about people and how we act in the world, what motivates us, how we act as a group, what are our motivations as communities and versus as individuals.
Yeah, it does seem like comedy has to be a study of people to be current, of course. So sociology is a very good major or minor to have in college. Howard, I wanted to ask you, in the movies, I Hate Valentine's Day, you played a homeless guy. And in Off Duty, you played a junkie. Have you ever been a homeless junkie in real life, or do you stay in character when you come home?
I've never been a homeless junkie, but I've been homeless, and I've never been a homeless junkie at the same time. You know, I had a home when I was a junkie, but I was when I was homeless, I actually cleaned myself up, so it worked out actually. So it's been good that way. Yes.
Yeah, and Rhonda, I wanted to ask you, and all three of the panel, we were talking, sometimes I hear this talk before we go on air, and it's really interesting. And to the three of you, how did the pandemic changing your life and how you approach comedy now? Of course, you don't have a live audience, and it's kind of difficult now. Rhonda first.
It has been wonderful for me. I feel so creative. I love it. And the fact that I'm doing these shows where I don't have to rely on audience reaction is very liberating, because I work fearlessly now. It doesn't matter. I can't hear if they're laughing or not, so screw them. I'm going to do what I think is funny. I find it very exciting. And I've been very creative, and I'm so fortunate to have the outlets that I do. I am a contributing writer to the Politipod podcast, and that comes out every other Wednesday, and you can find that on SoundCloud. And I contribute one-liners, I contribute my cartoons, that's a whole new thing for me. I have started doing cartoons with a great illustrator, Scott W., The Art of Scott W. We do political cartoons, and he just brought the second one over. Do you mind if I show it to you?
Oh, no, please do.
This one is called Back to Work America, and I don't know if you can see the detail on it, but it's at the Smithfield meatpacking plant. And you can see what happens as the work goes on.
Well, that's an upbeat cartoon.
Yes, it is.
That's lovely. I see what you're doing there.
The first one actually was Trump in a little skirt with pom-poms as America's cheerleader on a pile of bodies of COVID-19 people and unemployed.
So, Rhonda, can we get the time?
It's very exciting. I feel creative. I'm on John Fugelsang's show on Monday nights, chatting it up with him about the current events. I'm on the Politipod podcast, acting on that and writing. I'm doing the cartoons. I feel very excited about the whole quarantine. I'm discovering so much more about myself.
Yeah, it's kind of nice. Sorry,
don't you miss the crowds a little bit? I mean, it's kind of fun to get up in front of people and just riff.
It's wonderful to do that, but in a parallel universe, in a different time, in the COVID-19 universe, not having to feel like their laughter or their judgment is the be all and end all is so liberating for me. Of course, I miss the crowds. As I said, I'm a Cancer astrological sign. I'm very touchy-feely. I miss greeting them, riffing with them. But I feel like I have that parallel route that's going on. That's really feeding me as an artist.
Rhonda, I just want to announce the times again. Rhonda is on the John Fugelsang show every Monday on Sirius. And what time is that?
I come on about 11:15 at night, Eastern Daylight Time on Sirius XM Progress channel 127. Yeah.
Love Sirius. And you're a collaborator on the Scott and Hansome cartoons. Where could we see that?
Yes. I'm the writer. I have the bright ideas, and he just beautifully illustrates them. He is absolutely fantastic, and I think he's on Facebook at the Art of Scott W.
And Barry, has your comedy changed since the coronavirus? Are you working on something special, or do you have something to promote? How do you feel?
Still working audiences of 1 to 2 people, as I always have, because that's where I work. I mean, we all met at shows where we were so ahead of the curve, doing the social distancing with the audiences that we had in that Brooklyn Commons. But
Yeah.
I mean, they were small crowds. Rich, you were the best audience there. I have to say that had you not been there, I wouldn't have kept coming back because you laughed at this stuff. I don't know what it says about your judgment, but you were always laughing at this stuff.
Well, not just me, but the piano player, Raphael DeLugoff,
Right.
who's a very good friend of mine, and his dad used to own the Village Gate, where I saw Woody Shaw play, and Buddy Rich would come, and all these great musicians. And the fellow who hired us, who hired the comedians, what was his name?
Randy,
Yes.
our common bond,
Randy
Predico,
and
of course.
Bianca.
Randy like that.
Randy and Danny Vitale, by the way, lives in the building next door to me. I'm in Manhattan Plaza on 9th Avenue. He's on 10th Avenue. And one time I called Danny Vitale thinking it was my brother. I was on the phone with him for 15 minutes before I found out. But Danny's one of the funniest guys, and we hope to have him and Randy on the show once they release their Paranoia and they could come here and work camera. So we're working on that.
Yesterday was Danny's birthday.
Yes.
As everybody saw, yeah.
God bless him. I wish.
Or 2 days ago. I guess 2 days ago.
Yeah.
But
Barry,
I have to tell you, you're right, Barry, that working at the Brooklyn Commons on Randy's show with Richie and Howard was excellent training for being online and talking to the world, because Randy was always addressing someone who lived in Las Vegas when we were at the.
He did. He broadcast those live, yeah.
And you never know who is watching you or where they're watching you, and it was great training for us, especially since we'd have maybe 5 or 6 people sitting there in the audience, and we gave it our all. We'd get up, we'd do our all. I actually sang a parody that you wrote, didn't I, Richie? Sing a parody there at the Brooklyn Commons with Raphael. Raphael wrote the parody.
we might have performed it right, but I didn't write it. Raphael or Randy wrote it. So probably you're right, Rafi.
Raphael wrote a parody song, and I sang it. I mean, we would have Bianca the dog on stage. It was great. It was great training for being footloose and fancy free.
Well, a little side story about Randy. Randy is not only a talented comedian, he does impersonations. He was on the Carson Show. He's one of the funniest people and moderators in the world. And also, Randy's dog was Roger Stone threatened to kill his dog. So he's been on CNN many times. And that's kind of like a little side story with Randy that's very funny, I think, to me in real life.
My cat, but that didn't get any publicity.
Not enough. And Howard, has your life changed in any way during the pandemic?
No, not really. It's pretty much just lying around the house like I always did. I don't get out as much. I was talking to Barry and Rhonda earlier about when you live alone and you're kind of quarantined like this, you get into what I call the Howard Hughes syndrome, where you kind of just it's easy to let that happen. You just kind of let yourself go. You don't shave or shower, and you keep a cup by your bed. And never get off the bed. So after the first month, I sort of made myself get off the bed and shave and shower and stuff. But you could see where that could really happen to you during when you're quarantined like this. You can get into a kind of a Howard Hughes kind of thing.
Yeah, you did say you live in a basement apartment that has a great view of the Manhattan skyline. Do you truly live in a basement apartment?
No, I live on the second floor. I never said I live in the basement. But
somebody wrote that accidentally.
I have a view of a thrift shop across the street. I don't live far from the Manhattan skyline. I can't see it, but I do live near Manhattan. I live near the Lincoln Tunnel, so I'm like 10 minutes from the Port Authority. If anybody cares.
Nice. Yeah.
Do all of you have the 7 p.m. pots and pans pep rally going on in your neighborhoods?
Oh, for the well, I don't live near a hospital, so no. I mean, no, first responders or ER people or anything, come past my house. So it would just be, cheering the bodega guy on the corner or something, and it doesn't. Although, he goes out and handles stuff. So maybe we should get something like that going for him.
We have it.
I'm in the South Bronx, and at 7:00 every night the pit bulls bark. So so
they do the work. Yeah.
No, we got a guy in our neighborhood who has appointed himself the 7 p.m. DJ. So he's blasting every night. It's either Bruce Springsteen or Billy Joel. And then it's always Sinatra's, New York. And if we hear that song one more time, I'm going to dig Sinatra up just to smack him around.
There you go.
Yeah. Is that for the hospital people? Or
it's for the first responders. Yeah, because that's shift change to 7 p.m. And it began in March when we were at the height of this thing. But, I, for one, vote, maybe it's seen its time. Maybe it's time to move on from the 7 p.m. pep rally.
Yeah, we do that here on 43rd and 9th, and I'm very careful not to make it about myself. Like just 2 times I played the Call to the Colors. It's not like playing taps, which is kind of sad. But I hide myself, just crack my door open. But I don't do it every day because people who play Sinatra and play their horns, it's kind of making it about yourself while we're at a vulnerable time. So I think it's good to go out there and I beat my pots and pans, and it kind of brings New York together and makes me proud. Howard, I had another question for you. You did a bit where you were certainly ahead of Trump, where you were handing out marathon runners salt water. And you said the next year you would hand them out Clorox because they should die, and they made you feel inadequate. Do you still feel that way about marathon runners, Howard?
Yeah, I hate marathons.
Can't blame you.
I hate exercise. I hate marathon runners. I hate these assholes. They tie up traffic. People. I hate being outside. I'm loving this actually. I hate people who gratuitously go outside. And unless it's to the beach. I like the beach. So.
There was a famous saxophone player named, called Joe Romano from, I think he was from upstate Rochester like I was. And Joe pulled me aside one day and said, Richie, we have to have an attitude meeting. I hate everybody and everything, including myself. So I took this to heart, and it makes me feel a lot better about, the way you feel about marathon runners. Rhonda, we're going to get into current affairs now. There was a tax cut where 83% of the funds was recently given to the top 1% of the wealthiest people in America.
You noticed that?
It takes time to trickle down the leg to the middle class, so we have to be patient. 40% of Americans can't afford a $400 emergency medical bill, and over 50% of America's wealth is owned by 3 people in America: Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, and Jeff Bezos, who's going to become the first trillionaire ever. And Rhonda, my question is, how could we make sure that the next tax break goes to the struggling billionaires in our non-socialist country?
So that the tax break goes to the struggling billionaires. I find the tax cut wasn't that in January, Barry? Was that early? That was done early in January.
The original tax cut. So he didn't touch the economy until December of 2017, and it didn't get enacted until January of 2018.
Yeah, and I felt like this is going to come and bite us in the ass, and it actually has. I mean, all of that money that went to the 1% and to corporate welfare kings could have been used from January here to get us on track with PPE, with masks, with ventilators, and not having our governors go begging, to different countries for what they needed. I hope there will be a major shift, a major change in the country from the upper class, from the 1%, that they understand that they have to contribute to us. They can't just keep taking our tax money, taking our labor, and without sharing it. I mean, when Eisenhower was president, these people had a higher tax rate than they do now. They're getting more and more money every single day, and the president of the United States is like the grifter in chief. He's like organizing these
Still haven't seen his tax returns. Still haven't seen his tax returns. You know, he'd love to release him, except he's at the Supreme Court saying that there's no way on earth he should be forced to release them. But he'd love to release them.
Aren't they still auditing them?
Yeah, in all fairness, they're being audited, Howard. You're right.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. As soon as the audit's over. You know how you keep a Trump fan in suspense? Yeah. I'll tell you when the audit's over.
The IRS moves slowly, I guess, when it comes to the president.
It's nuts. And the right wing will tell you, well, it's private and he has every rule. Where is the curiosity on the right wing? These guys find conspiracies in Barack Obama's tan suits, but they're not at all curious about 3 meetings with Putin without a transcript. They're not at all curious about tax returns that he can't. No curiosity at all in any of that, or his ties to Deutsche Bank and Justice Kennedy's son working at Deutsche Bank. Facts, no interest to them. But that brown suit, man, that required investigation.
You're absolutely right, Barry. They don't even want people to know who's visiting the White House. They got rid of the guest list, the visitors list there.
Right.
They don't want you to know anything. But what I do miss getting updates about Melania's White House tennis pavilion. That was
what is happening with that?
Yes, that was under construction, I believe, in April or so, and I haven't gotten any updates, and I'm really disturbed. I need to know how the tennis pavilion is coming along.
That is wise.
Go ahead, Bear. I'm sorry.
I was going to say it's just a wise expenditure of taxpayer funds.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Now, this next question is it's a little bit of a setup, but it's to Barry. And we were talking about how the states are bidding against each other. Rhonda was talking about that. Currently, Trump is pitting 50 states against each other in a bizarre game of The Apprentice. Republican Governor Baker of Massachusetts says confirmed orders for millions of pieces of gear have evaporated before his eyes as he is bidding for equipment with different states and the federal government. Republican Governor Larry Hogan of Maryland had to deploy the National Guard to keep the feds from seizing 500,000 COVID-19 tests that they had purchased from North Korea. Illinois comptroller.
The North Korean tests are a little tricky. South Korea.
From South Korea, my bad. Thank you. Illinois comptroller, thank you, Barry. Good proofreading. Illinois comptroller Susan Mendoza sent her aide Alan Andres careening down an expressway with a $3 million check to a vendor, worried she might lose out to Russian competitors who had offered her cash for protective masks. A Silicon Valley engineer by the name of Yaron Orange Pine scored an $86 million contract just days after tweeting President Trump that he could supply ventilators for the coronavirus pandemic. None were delivered. My question to you, Barry, is why can't these blue state governors have their PPE masks, gowns, and ventilators delivered safely? What is wrong with them?
You know, I didn't study for this quiz. I really didn't know I was going to.
I
didn't know this was my job to tell you.
It's a long way to the joke, and I do apologize.
But I mean, that was an unbelievable amount of reliable information. And now you're asking me, let me see if I understand the question, why the blue state governors can't get their shit together?
Yeah, and that's the way I originally phrased it, but I took the word shit out. Thank you. That's good, though.
They can't get their shit together because the president is not leading. He's not taking the initiative and coordinating all of this process. It's so complicated. It needs leadership from the top down. I yield to my Barry Weintraub, my colleague.
Thank you, my colleague. It's even more insidious than that, because while we're supposed to be the United States of America, never in the lifetime of the four of us or anyone have we seen a president so actively try to divide people and literally call for violence to support his reelection. But he's not a rocket scientist. Now he's attacking the state of Michigan, where he cannot win this election if he doesn't win Michigan. And yet he's attacking this state because is it because they're preparing for mail-in votes, or what was the reason this week he was attacking the state of Michigan? He's withholding aid because they're trying to improve the mail-in.
Right. Absentee ballot applications, so he's very upset about that.
He's also trying to kill the U.S. Post Office. I mean,
Barry, isn't it good to have Barry? Isn't it good to have a president that speaks like the normal person, that's strong and
a president who's I woke up this morning and on Twitter I saw this edit of all the people who were refusing to wear their masks, and they're spitting at people and they're breathing on them, and not one of them really looked like a constitutional scholar. And I believe this is the problem, that the guy in the White House is also not a constitutional scholar, and he's encouraging the wrong emotions in too many people. I have a phrase, it's called all foxed up. And that's the problem with the whole country. The whole country has spent 24 years being foxed up. Good people, people I know and love, who are naturally conservative individuals, have been drawn into this Fox universe and then slowly reeled in with conspiracy theory after conspiracy theory for 20 years. They're wound up tighter than a baseball, believing things that are patently false. And then this guy came in on the grift, and he hijacked the whole movement. So you have these foxed up individuals who have no idea what patriotism really is, but they're waving the flag and they're spitting on people and they're refusing to wear a mask because we're sheep for paying attention to science and being considerate. Our masks protect others from us. But that's not what you're seeing now. And we're getting this all from the White House. Remember Ghostbusters 2, where that slime was running under the street and they realized it was making everyone hostile and they had to get the clothes off because the slime was making everyone hostile? The slime is coming from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and it's not going to stop flowing. It's not going to stop flowing.
You're right, Barry. And you were just talking about him being in Michigan. He was very upset about the applications for the absentee ballots being sent out. They are suffering from a flood. They have dams that are breaking all over the place. These people are underwater, and the president thinks a real patriot would swim to the polls to vote for me.
I would like to bring Howard into this conversation. This question, again, is a little bit set up a little longer. Pompeo had the removal of 4 inspector generals. In April, Trump fired Inspector General Danny Kaye. No, that would be Glenn Fine, who was appointed.
Danny Kaye.
That would be Glenn Fine, who was appointed the watchdog. Watchdog of $2 trillion coronavirus relief bill. Also in April, he fired the IG Michael Atkinson, who had overseen the whistleblower complaint that led to the president's impeachment. Early this month, Trump replaced Christy Grimm, the top watchdog at Health and Human Services, a month after she reported on severe shortages of coronavirus testing kits, PPE, ventilators. The Inspector General just recently, Howard, Steve Linick, was fired. Linick was looking into misuse of a political appointee to perform personal tasks for Pompeo and his wife that included dog walking, picking up dry cleaning, and making restaurant reservations. But more importantly, he was investigating the arms sale to Saudi Arabia involving Pompeo. The liberal left says that this is similar to the Iran-Contra scandal that was a U.S. secret arms deal circumventing permission from Congress for illegal arms sales. While Linick serves at the pleasure of the president, and the president could pretty much fire anyone he wants, still it's illegal to fire someone who is discovering waste and fraud. For that reason, that's just something you don't do. Like it may be legal for the president to drop trowel on the White House lawn and take a dump, but you're not supposed to do that. My question to you, Howard, is it really legal for the president to drop trowel on the White House lawn and take a poop? And wouldn't that be indecent exposure? And could he be arrested for insufficient evidence?
Can you repeat the question?
Well,
No.
is it really illegal? Howard,
yeah, I don't think it should be illegal to take a dump or anywhere. Actually, I wouldn't care about that.
I agree.
I think all the other stuff you said before that should be illegal.
Right.
So that's what I think. The taking a dump thing doesn't bother me. I can't speak for anyone else.
Yeah, and the insufficient evidence, would that be an issue also?
That should be all the other people, should be well. I like you said, he has a right to fire anybody else, but he shouldn't do it. Just like but he should take a dump on the White House lawn and shoot somebody on 7th Avenue.
Yeah, it is kind of weird and disrespectful. I think
fire any of those people. Should it be illegal? No, he's the president. He could fire anybody he wants, and
pretty much he could do anything he wants. He's the president.
Should he be
right?
above?
Well, he can't do anything.
Law?
But,
is the president above the law? Is that your question? Is the president above the law?
That is kind of what we're getting to.
No, he's not above the law. But I don't know that it's illegal for him to fire anybody. It may be.
Howard,
well, you said it's illegal to fire somebody who's investigating.
Give notice. He has got to give notice and reason for this. You can't just willy go around doing that. You do have
it's illegal.
And have input from the other branches of government. Have we forgotten that we do have
it's illegal, and it's illegal to fire somebody who's investigating you.
Well, yeah, if you're investigating waste and fraud, that might be a bad reason to fire someone.
Pretty much everything this guy does is crime in plain sight. Everything he does is obstruction of justice.
Yeah, well, that's just a given. That's just something everybody should know. Yeah.
But they don't.
But everybody in the administration is doing that. Everybody is doing it. Even Richie, you mentioned Pompeo. His wife is included in this scandal. With the diplomatic dinners and having the diplomatic aides go get their orders of food and laundry. But people were asking the aides if about the scandal. They refused to reveal anything but her code name, Lady Macbeth.
out damn spot. What the interesting part of this scandal is? They're writing some reports now that Pompeo is actually stabbing Trump in the back in that he's plotting his 2024 run for the White House.
Well, that's what she's been doing at these diplomatic dinners, getting big donors information, culling all that information for his war chest, for his campaign chest.
Yeah, the whole thing is, like I said, everything is crime in plain sight. The Mueller report actually addressed the fact that if a man is committing a crime in front of the cameras, there's a cognitive dissonance. How could it be wrong if he's showing everyone what he's doing? But that's been the brilliance of these last 3 years of criminality, is he does it right out in the open. He's not hiding it from anyone. So those who are inclined to believe him are like, well, how could it be illegal? He's showing you what he's doing. It's a stroke of genius. And
don't get me started on the Mueller report, Barry, because I started reading that Mueller report, and as soon as I got to the part where it said that he couldn't convict the president, I closed that book and took it back to the library.
I actually read that damn thing. It took me quite a while. I'm not going to pretend that and it's shocking the way they have convinced the world that it was a fraud. Russia wasn't a fraud.
It was not.
Every joint committee has come to the same conclusion. They interfered in the 2016 campaign, and they did so to aid Trump. In the Mueller report, it actually said, while we couldn't prove actual connections, everywhere the Russians tried to help the Trump campaign welcomed it. And if we could bring it back to our friend Randy and Roger Stone in his trial, Gates, who was Manafort's #1 assistant on the campaign staff, testified, and Roger Stone, that he was in the car with Trump when Trump took a call from Roger Stone telling him they were going to be releasing more WikiLeaks information about Hillary's emails and Podesta's emails. Trump knew this was happening. It's been testified to on the stand, under oath, during the Roger Stone trial, and yet they control the narrative, and they've got half of America believing that it was all a fraud and that it was a hoax. It was no hoax. The evidence is out there.
Ivana's emails. I mean, she's doing government business on her phone.
Yeah.
President's daughter. Nobody is talking about that. I mean, it is so frustrating. It is absolutely frustrating. And like you say, they're doing everything out in the open, out in plain sight, and his cult followers just go right along with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with Rhonda and Barry.
I agree with Rhonda and Barry. Hey, I'd like to change the subject to our borders. We've been containing our borders by jailing babies that may turn out to be rapists and drug dealers. It's important to completely close our borders so people seeking sanctuary can't take our jobs by picking grapes and oranges for $6 an hour with no benefits. Thousands of these children have been abused sexually and raped. My question to the panel is, why do these children dress so provocatively? And how could we make sure that the guards don't bother these kids when they leave their cages to go out to the toilet bowl to get some water? Why is that we can't handle these two things?
Rich, your deadpan style is killer. You're killer.
Well, none of you should be sidemen for me. I mean, you are the funniest people in the world, but thank you for the compliment.
You're killing, man. I love you hit hard and you just go one way while you're zigging the other. I love it. But it's clearly the kid's fault. I mean, nobody really looks more alluring than someone who's just walked 1,500 miles without a drink of water.
Especially if they're sick.
You remember, what was it? The caravan. Remember during the 2018 campaign, there was a caravan coming, and he was going to send the whole military, and then it just never happened, and it was never addressed again. And
it was like 8 people or something. Yeah.
No, they control.
It was the same people who come to the Brooklyn Commons on Sundays. Yeah.
By the way, I have to say, I see Joan is watching, and we love Joan Reinmuth, so I'm saying hi to Joan.
Oh, see the comments there?
Hi, Joan. I love Joan. Joan and I are going to be working on stuff together, too.
I am a huge fan of Joan.
And Joan Boscom, I have no idea who she is, but hi anyway.
You actually if you met, you would know Joan. You know her. She's been at all the shows.
No, I know Joan. I don't know Gloria Boscom.
Oh, the other folks, yeah.
Say hello to her.
So the comments here are from Joan Rainmuth. She says Howard Never Stern.
Howard Never Stern.
Howard. To me, Howard is the best interviewer in the world right now. He has 1-hour interviews with James Taylor, Tony Bennett, Lady Gaga. I want to ask Lady Gaga, if I shorten her name, could I just call her Ga? Would that be okay? But I hope to meet her. And Randall Monaco says Crime in Progress. Who could you explain to me who Joan Rainmuth is? Anyone on the panel?
Joan has performed on all of our shows.
She's been in all shows.
Oh, my bad.
She is a self.
Yeah, she comes to all the shows. Yeah, she at the Brooklyn Commons. Yeah.
Red Diaper Baby. She is a comedian and a fantastic artist.
And a nurse, a lifelong nurse.
A nurse and a great jewelry maker and a very funny woman.
Very funny. She has such a great take. And Randy, to Randy's credit, he put her on stage grudgingly, but he kept giving her stage time. And I really think he helped Joan develop because she's very funny.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So there you go, Joan. We're all shouting out to you, baby.
Say, I'd like to get a little more out of the current affairs and ask Barry something. It's about dating and maybe the whole panel, but dating is very hard as a jazz musician. We have lives where we're staying out at all hours, lots of drugs, and we're completely undependable, and that's our good traits. Come to think of it, it sounds like we're a really good Tinder date. Anyways, I was dating this one girl, and I asked her, how come every time I take you out to dinner, it costs me hundreds of dollars? And she said, because I'm a prostitute, stupid. My question is, in your case, in your case, Barry, dating must be completely particularly difficult since you're married. So how do you go about it?
First of all, there's no back door, which makes it really tricky in a New York City apartment. There's no sneaking in, no sneaking out. Oh, well, I guess there are apartments in New York with back doors, but not where I live. No, dating is tough. You sound, comics and jazz musicians sound very much similar by your description.
Yeah.
Where you're in the club, late at night,
Jones.
you're drinking, you're hammered, or some variation thereof. I dated a little bit.
Your own profession, other comics or other jazz musicians.
Did you guys work like I did when I was 17? I left Rochester because I knew I had two older brothers that were great musicians, but they ended up getting day gigs and never left Rochester. And that was my big fear. I would dream of thousands of people applauding. And eventually, when I worked with Frank Sinatra for 5 years and I worked in Japan with my own band, that came to a realization. But did you guys ever work in small clubs? My first move in Boston, working with musicians and comedians, was actually in strip clubs. It was like, so I do have an affinity with musicians. But what were some of the bizarre places, small joints you worked in that you could remember?
The good times.
Yeah.
Good times. Wow.
Well, I used to really, really enjoy emceeing male strip shows out on Long Island.
Was that where you started?
I used to work on Long Island all the time. People thought I was a Long Island comic, and I did a lot of my work emceeing the male strip shows at places like Escapes. And Jackie Martling gave me my first paying job out there at Governor's. Yeah,
Jackie gave me my first paying job.
Yeah, and I love that excitement. All the women screaming, all the men taking off their clothes. That was a lot of fun.
Well, we all three of us were really fortunate because we were coming up during the comedy boom when clubs were starting to actually grow and pay. But and we're really, I used to host shows. Howard, my favorite line, which you still do from time to time, but I would bring Howard up and he'd say to the audience late at night, don't think of going somewhere else because I'm the late night act there too. And we worked at Dangerfields. We worked at the Cellar. We worked at the Strip. But we did have a lot, like the Good Times was this little place. It was on 31st Street and 1st Avenue? 3rd
Avenue.
And it had been a diner, so it was all glass encased, and we'd perform in between these arches. And I remember being on stage and people were like laughing, but not with me. And I turned around and they were like homeless people, like mocking me from behind on the street. Rico Guerrero.
They'd go on after there'd be like 5 singers and then they put on a comic. And so that was weird. So it wasn't really a comedy club per se.
No, but Pat Benatar was one of the singers.
Yeah.
At that place. And then she moved up to Catch. But we all worked like Catch and the Improv and Comic Strip and
Triple N, the Big Apple.
Right. The Cellar when Grunfest ran it and Rick Chrome. I didn't work it after that, but I worked it when those guys were there. And there was Who's on First.
Audition for the Cellar.
Say again?
I think I still have to audition for the Cellar.
But you worked Comedy U and Who's on First?
Oh, yeah. Comedy U.
Comedy
U was just incredible. Richie, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but it was so supportive of women comics. Paul Herzig was part of that. And I loved it because I lived down there in Lower Manhattan. I lived in Tribeca and Comedy U was in Soho. And it was just a fantastic incubation ground for people like Joy Behar and Judy Gold and myself and Reno, the comedian Reno and Susie Sorrow. Those were fabulous times. It was a golden age, Barry. I really do agree with you. It was booming. It was very exciting. And what I liked about being a Catch a Rising Star was that you never know what huge comedian was going to be. You would have to follow. That was the great thing. Like Robin Williams would come in or David Brenner, and if you one of the new comics, that was the slot they put you in. after some big time person was on, you had to go on and work your grind. It was really a training ground.
Do you remember waiting online to get a number to audition on Monday night?
I did that with my son in his stroller. I would go in during the day with the stroller to wait online for numbers at the Improv and at Catch a Rising Star, and then at night come out, after like 10 or 11 o'clock to go on.
Right.
And you got like 3 minutes. Nobody would watch you. And,
yeah, if you didn't get number 1, 2, or 3 at Catch, then you weren't going to get on until after midnight. And you had to learn that by getting there a few times. But the first time I ever auditioned to Catch, after finally getting a good number, I followed Belzer doing like 45 minutes. I put on weight. I ate it so badly. It was just horrible.
But that's how we got our comedy muscle.
That's how you get strong, yeah.
I want to ask you about pushing the boundaries as comedians. Like Sarah Silverman did the See You Next Tuesday song, which is kind of an acronym. I don't want to say the word. And Richard Pryor, I mean, if it wasn't for Richard Pryor, there'd be no Chappelle. But how do you all, I mean, all three of you are certainly no sidemen, but how do you, let me start with Howard. How do you push the boundary and come up with these jokes that are kind of like Stephen Wright, they're just, it's like, to me, it's like a left hook from Ali, it's just like catches you unsurprised. Do you get out a paper and pad and come to these decisions, or how do you think about your lines?
Like, how do I come up with my material? I just come up with, but that's it. You just,
it's hard to be original.
Yeah, if I take out a pad and paper, 90% of the time, nothing. See, it's hard now because I write a lot of my stuff on the subway. So I like come home. It's kind of tough. I come up with a lot of stuff in the process of doing other stuff. Like I'll come up with something while making some salad or riding the subway or walking across. Walking is good for writing material. So if I'm walking, what am I going to do besides walking? You can't just walk. So you write jokes, and that's how that works. So walking is really good. But you're supposed to stay home, so you can't walk very, very much now. So it's a little tough. But that's what it is. You do it, like I do it. I'll walk somewhere and I'll be thinking like, boy, I feel pretty much how I look right now. When it is something like that, or I remember coming out on my 18th birthday, and I wasn't even gay. I was just trying to fuck up my dad's birthday, and I'll do that in the process of walking across town. So walking is very good for writing, I find.
And
that's actually true. I'm not just trying to be
You're not really good with computers, I take it, or iPhones. Do you carry a pad and pencil with you when you walk, Howard?
No, because then I'm consciously writing. I have to be concentrating on walking, and writing is secondary.
But how do you remember this stuff when you get home?
Well, it's just there, and I recall it on stage. Hopefully,
wow, that's hard. Yeah. I have to write stuff down, or I forget it. Even like I got to take a pill at 2 p.m. I have to. If I don't mark it on my iPhone, I take it like 5 times in a day. Same question to you, Rhonda. How do you get your?
Richie, I'm like you. That I have to write it down. But for me, the inspiration just comes from whatever is going on. Like I saw Dr. Burks on a Corona update, and she actually said to us, to the American citizens, to create YouTube videos about social distancing, to teach us about social distancing. And I'm thinking, TikTok is going to be lit. It's going to be lit with the misinformed leading the asymptomatic, and it just comes to me from out of the air. Whatever is going on it hits me like a bolt of lightning. And if I don't write it down, it disappears. I feel like I've got 2 more acts that have just disappeared into the ether because I didn't write anything.
And Barry, you push the edge too. How do you get especially during these pandemic times, you can't take too many walks, and poor Howard can't ride the subway. Actually, you can. I went to Chinatown to pick up some Chinese tea medicine. So the subway is completely empty. It's really cool now. It's surreal.
And they're cleaning it.
Yeah, it's clean. There's no one there. It's like my own subway. It's great. But Barry, same question to you. How do you come up with new material? And,
well, I actually do what Howard does. I walk, but I kind of dictate it into the notes on the phone. But
yeah,
when I also over the years have tended to ad lib like Rhonda, like you say, I would ad lib stuff when I was on stage, and I'd come off, and friends would go, "That was great. Did you write it down?" I forgot to write that down, and I would lose tons of material that was. I'm really funny like 3 minutes ago. My best stuff is shit I can't remember or has a shelf life of the best joke I ever wrote. I swear to this day, I feel it's my best joke. If you remember, nobody remembers this, but the night before Nelson Mandela was released from prison, Mike Tyson was defeated in the ring by Buster Douglas. And I was working in Baltimore, and my joke was, Mike Tyson lost, yeah, and Nelson Mandela's getting out of prison tomorrow, too. Well, that joke was good for 7 minutes, but it was really the best joke I ever wrote because it was both topical and true. Maybe for those of you who don't know who Nelson Mandela was, he was in prison for like 30 years. So the odds of him getting out, that's where the comedy would have been. And this is why...
Barry, now... I really sympathize with your having to explain that, and I find that can be very challenging with doing political material. Well, in the clubs, sometimes if the audience is not familiar with the reference, it really it doesn't land. It can't land because they don't know who Nelson Mandela is.
So you got to give them that info.
It's very political.
And for me, if I have to set it up like an essay, you lose the spontaneity and the thing, of the punchline. And I think that's one of the interesting challenges for us who do topical material. Also, that people forget very quickly. People may have realized some things, but then they forget very, very quickly that the caravan was threatening to bring the United States down, or even that Mexico was going to pay for the wall.
Right. They were. Yeah, explaining a joke kind of doesn't make it funny anymore, and I've become more and more comfortable speaking at my music jobs because I felt I'm bringing the audience in. It's a strange thing when you're learning your instrument, and I did kind of put the audience to the side because I was trying to get to a point where I was happy with my music. They were not quite the enemy, but I didn't bring them in. But now I love talking to the audience. I actually do like jokes, for like 3 to 5 minutes. I could never do like a half an hour like you all can, but it's kind of fun. But if I'm in Rochester and I do a joke that I do in New York, I would get the Mussolini treatment. It would be like piano wire. So when you travel, do you change your material a little? God.
I had the worst experience. I was in a place called Horsham, England. Horsham, England. I have no idea where I was. And I was doing my American political material. And I have to tell you that I needed to be escorted out of there undercover by the end of it. It was like just this crazy pitchfork, like working class British crowd. They didn't want to hear any of that shit, but I didn't have anything else. That was my act. So, you live and you die. But yeah, you're right. You got to know who you're talking to.
Howard, did you ever bomb doing material that that didn't belong in that certain city? Did
No, but I've heard it's really rough when that happens.
Howard's 40. He's never had that problem.
Yeah, no, I've heard bombing is terrible.
Yeah, I've heard that too. From you, by the way, I've heard that. Yeah.
But no, yeah, the problem is I bombed doing perfectly relevant material. They just didn't like it, so that was a little bit disheartening, when when they, the road is interesting because sometimes if you're used to doing like New York or wherever you're from, and you go to some rural area, it's a lot different, and it's just the people are different, and if you're, I've been told I'm a little bit offbeat, so some of the more rural places, or even some of the more suburban places, are a little less receptive. They want the generic kind of Joe comic, and it's it's there's all kinds of audiences, and it's never me, so that makes me feel
There
good.
you go. Yeah. Well, musically, I do the same thing. If I travel to, I went to Beirut, Lebanon, and the musicians just happen to play Latin American beat better than us. They couldn't play quickly. And so I changed half of my material had like a Latin beat to it. So yeah, we do change musically and comedic wise, I'm sure. I'd like to lighten the mood a little and talk about depression now. There was two of my favorite comedians were Robert Williams and Richie Jenny. People may not remember Jenny as well. He did this whole routine about Jaws 3 and 4 where he said, well, the family had to get away from a shark, but they moved to an island, and I'm watching Jaws 4, and I have no life, and I'm just a spine, and I have no brain, and and it's just so funny. And to me,
there's no faster transportation than shark. That's
yes, and a beautiful suit, and Robin too. I mean, to me, Popeye was a brilliant movie. I love watching Popeye. It's like A Wonderful Life got panned when it came out, and Star Trek also. So I don't listen to the reviews. I mean, who else could play Popeye? And then Shelley Duvall plays, if I got the correct actors, played Olive Oyl. It was just perfect casting. But the point I'm getting into is both of these gentlemen were some of the funniest and I thought happiest people in the world. And I know that Barry and Rhonda knew Robin personally. I don't know if you
Richie.
did, Howard.
I knew Richie. Richie was my second friend in comedy.
Could you speak about that, and then Rhonda talk about Robin? Could you tell us about Richie?
Well,
Jenny?
I met Richie.
Brilliant comedian.
Richie was brilliant. I met Richie at Pips in Brooklyn, which was the first place I ever went to try to be a comedian. John Mulrooney and Richie were already friends. They would later become roommates. I was in college at the time, and I had seen the guy who owned Pips, George Schultz, was on The Late Show with Tom Snyder, or The Late Late Show. So I went to Brooklyn, and I met Richie, and I did an audition set, and they loved me, and they asked me if I could come back that weekend, and I said no, because I got to go back to college. And when I came back over the summer, I got to spend a lot of time with Richie, but he was always saying, Traub, it's never going to work, Traub. I got to get out. He was always great to me. Even as he was climbing the ladder and becoming more and more famous, he helped me with my magazines. He appeared in Comedy USA. He did a tour that I produced, he and Mulrooney and some other folks. But when I moved to LA, and this gives you an indication of where he was at, he was on television. He had a show called The Platypus Man. He had a Showtime special, and his billboard was up on Sunset Boulevard. I hadn't seen him in a long time, and I was in the restaurant part of the Improv in LA, and I don't want to overplay it because I never even worked there, but I saw him, and we were friends. And he just said, Traub, it's all over, Traub. It's all over, because I guess they had canceled his Platypus Man TV show. But I was like, Rich, I don't know if you noticed, but your face is on a fucking billboard on Sunset Boulevard. And he was just so defeatist, and I was working in Cleveland at Hilarities in March, several years back now, and when I walked in and they told me what had happened, he had just had it in his mind he was going to take his own life. They had intervened, they had taken his weapons, but he put a gun in his mouth in the shower and he took his life. He was massively depressed, and yet he was such a brilliant guy, and he had a reputation of being aloof and standoffish, and let me tell you why. Because when he was on the road, he stayed in his room, and all he ever did was write. As a matter of fact, the biggest break I ever got in my life was in the city of San Francisco, that's where my career kind of began to happen for me. And the reason it did was because he and I were working there. I was the middle act. He was the headliner. And that was just happenstance. It wasn't because we knew each other. but they had told him the wrong time to show up for work. So I went up to do my 20 minutes as the middle act, and I kept getting this, which is stretch, because they forgot to go get Richie. And I ended up doing like 45 minutes. And as you two will attest, if you're doing a short set, Richie, you'd leave out a lot of filler. So when they're telling you to stretch, it's like, ooh, I already left all the crap that was going to stretch. But I had a great set that night. The people who ran that club never forgot it. And it really changed my life. And it was because I was working with Richie, who was such a Richie Jenny. But, you know, he had a bad rep with some folks as being a little standoffish. But the reason was he was always in his room writing. And, you know, and now I'm getting a little choked up because he was very good to me, and he achieved such fame. And he is a great comic that most people probably these days don't even know.
Yeah, you're right. Please go to YouTube and look up Richard Jenny and watch his routine. And it's to me, it's important to get out of your life. I'm such a musician, and hanging with musicians, I purposely push the boundaries, and I start helping people in kayaks. And I joined Animal Haven to help clean up after dogs and cats. And I help in Brooklyn. I help put autistic kids on horses, which I'm hoping will start again, whether we're in masks or gloves. But I purposely have gotten away from musicians, and I start sewing and I start singing, and I'm doing all different bike riding and stuff that has nothing to do purposely with music, because it becomes all enveloping and you really can't grow as a person. Howard, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. You were going to say something, Howard? Do you know any comedians that died lately, Howard?
Do I know any comedians that died?
Yeah, not on stage, but literally.
I don't know. You know, the biggest inspiration, the reason I got into comedy was I used to collect all these old. There used to be all these old record stores in the village. Some of them are still there. And I started buying Lenny Bruce albums, and I really got into Lenny Bruce. And he was great, and I loved a lot of the albums and some of those bits. And I thought, boy, that's great. So I started writing bits, and I found that, you know, when I got on stage, it wasn't at all like Lenny Bruce. I wasn't at all political or topical or really a storyteller. And you got to kind of find yourself. But Lenny Bruce was really my inspiration. And I believe he died. Who else died? Richard Pryor was great.
Howard, I have to tell you that Ronnie Marmo does a great one-man show about Lenny Bruce. It's called
Ronnie who?
Ronnie Marmo. He's an actor, and he does a Lenny Bruce one-man show. I'm not a comedian. I'm Lenny Bruce. It's really.
Oh, I've heard of that. Yeah.
But Richie, I have another visual aid, and I'm just wondering, Barry, you mentioned.
Is that Mulrooney? That's you and Mulrooney. Oh my God! What are you, 12 years old in that picture?
Wow.
Oh wow! I thought that was
John Mulrooney.
Flashback.
Yeah, so I had another visual aid there.
John Mulrooney, truly a very funny man, incredibly funny.
Yeah.
Rhonda, did you know Robin Williams?
Well, I didn't know him personally. I admired him, and I would watch him from the back of Catch a Rising Star. And he would do his thing. He was amazing. He, no matter where he came in, he was like a tornado. Once he was on stage, he was compelling and very funny. I didn't know him personally.
I did get to know him a little bit when I lived in San Francisco. He was part of that circle. I mean, he was the key part of that circle. But that's a sad story, because he was on. He had, what is it called? Something Louis syndrome. It wasn't just depression.
Louis C.K.
No, but it was a degenerative disease, and you know, it wasn't just depression. I mean, he was sick. Beyond, not that depression isn't an illness, but there was something going on there.
But if we're going to talk about dead comedians, we got to mention Rich Giraldi, Patrice
O'Neal.
Patrice O'Neal.
We just lost Vic Henley, which was devastating.
Oh my God, I didn't know that.
You didn't know that?
Yeah. Vic died suddenly on April 4th, and nobody's been able to get together to mourn him, or, it's just terrible. And he had a sudden a hemorrhage of some sort. I'm not even sure, but Vic, who's just the happiest comic and one of our, we've all known him for 30 something years. He just went so fast and so suddenly.
William Stevenson, a lot of guys. Yeah.
William the year before, and William Stevenson. Yeah. Now we've lost a lot of our comrades.
Comrades, yeah.
Kevin Meaney was great.
So here I am with William Stevenson and Angela Scott. William is in the middle.
Angela's doing well, thank God, though, right?
Thank God. But William Stevenson is there, and we're at the duplex doing our three-header show there. Yeah. And I'm very interested, Richie, in your idea around the dead comedian discussion.
Well, Belushi and the thing is about Richard and Robin Williams and Richie Jenny is they seem not like I kind of expected it from Belushi and some of the others, but those two, if you didn't know them personally, it just didn't seem possible. They seemed like the happiest, handsomest, most successful comedians. But I think it's you never know what's going on behind artists, especially. They're very sensitive, and it's a difficult thing to see heroes like that, go. I mean, Pryor, he set himself on fire accidentally. I mean, just dangerous. So it's just something I thought of, and I miss them both dearly. And when I see them on YouTube or I watch Popeye, I go, this is just brilliance that was lost to the world, and nobody had a clue that it was happening.
Richie, Joan did. It's called Lewy body syndrome, which is what Robin suffered from. Joan just put that up there. But he was ill, and he was such a key component to. He lived in San Francisco to stay away from the Hollywood thing, and he supported. They had Comedy Day every year, and Robin. The fact that Robin was going to show up is one of the reasons it was always so successful. Without mentioning names. A dear friend of mine who fell ill, who Robin knew, who's a comic, who works very hard, needed surgery. And Robin just wrote a check. I'm not going to tell you how much it was or who it was, but it's the kind of guy he was. And he was really part of that community. He was a very good guy. I remember one Comedy Day, because I didn't do it every year. I used to live there, and then I would go back every now and then. At the end of the show, we're on stage, and someone says, get a picture with Robin. So I get in close, and he turns to me and goes, how was your set? Did you have a good set? I mean, he was a good guy. I didn't know him that well. I knew him, through degrees of separation, but he was a good guy, and his depression came from being attached to this Lewy body syndrome. So
I know when I had like a small part in Awakening with Robert Williams and Robert De Niro.
Right.
He was on the set, so he would hang out. He was a really good guy. He was a guy who kind of was what he was. I mean, he was the same guy. Yeah, you thought he was. It seemed that way. I mean, like I didn't know him well, obviously, but he was real gregarious and the improvising and being clowning around on and off set.
At the comic strip, we used to have an improv group, and it was during the time where Eddie Murphy was just at the height of his fame, and Robin was shooting Moscow on the Hudson in New York. So you remember those days wherever Eddie showed up with a limo, like 2 limos and an entourage. Robin would walk into the club with a baseball cap all by himself. And at that point in time, Robin was actually more famous. Eddie was like getting there. But Robin was hanging out because he wanted to do stuff with Eddie. And I was always afraid to jump in to yell freeze and do something with him because he did the improv group. And I was horrible at improv. And the one time I finally got up the nerve, I yelled freeze. I created some Russian character. He bit. It got a huge laugh, and I thought, oh, my God, I'm on stage with Robin Williams. And then Susie Sasma yelled freeze, and it was over just as fast as it started. It never went anywhere. But
that's interesting. I actually started in improv with the First Amendment Improv group, and
Robert Kentucky,
yeah, and improv is so exciting, and like you said, Barry, it can be you can get like one glittering moment, and then you're on to the next yes and the thing.
Right,
Yeah.
it was over just like that. But I had a moment on stage with Robin Williams when I was like 12 or whatever.
Well, I want to thank you all for the recollections, and we've been on for an hour and 22 minutes, which is quite long, and I have to tinkle soon. So,
this has been thank you.
Richie, I'm going to copy your interview style. I really have been fascinated by it. Thank you so much for having me. And it's so wonderful to be here with Barry and Howard and you. It just really brings that whole Brooklyn Commons feeling back to me about how wonderful it was to walk in there and not know what the heck was going to be happening, but still enjoy the company anyway.
Well, to have the three of you on is a real honor. I've been working with musicians way too much, but to have people that are actually funny and make me laugh. So I would like to thank Barry Weintraub, Howard Feller, Rhonda Hansome, who are gracious enough to be guests on our show. Next week, we're going to have musicians Ralph LaLama, Jerry Weldon, and John Mosca. I want to thank you all for watching, and stay safe. So long, folks. And do make sure you wear a mask, and because it's not for you, it's for the other people. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Great to see everybody.
Okay, take care, everybody.